So first of all, though, I want to give an overview. The information I am presenting reveals a disturbing crisis, quite opposite to Western media hysteria about the Russians invading Ukraine. Instead, the U.S. is the one that's conducting a war of aggression in Ukraine, and they're using various mercenary groups headed by Nazi ultranationalists. Ukraine is now controlled, as Ed spoke, by a coalition of neo-Nazi groups and billionaire oligarchs under the direction of the U.S. State Department. As critical context, the world's only superpower now is run by neoconservatives who project Adolf Hitler's goal of a 1,000-year Reich. In a grab to dominate the entire planet, Dick Cheney promised us a world, some of you might remember, a world with wars without end. This New World Order is memorialized in their PNAC 2000 documents. PNAC stands for Project for a New American Century, and it includes a process of keeping all regions of the world destabilized in a weak and impoverished state so that these weakened states are unable to get up off their knees effectively and establish a defense to fend off the U.S. Reich's assumed imperative. PNAC, the geostrategic formula of the Bush administration, has been carried forward into the Obama administration under what's now called the Foreign Policy Initiative. One of the principal authors of the U.S. geostrategic world hegemony is Zbigniew Brzezinski, who calls his NATO allies vassal states. If you've been watching a CBC or all the television in Canada, you notice that Stephen Harper is dutifully playing the role of a vassal puppet. The U.S. State Department pulls his strings, and he blurts out every condemnation of Russia that is assigned to him, effectively. Okay, let's look at some bullets in history and kind of lead us up to the present era. The city of Kiev, a lot of people don't realize, has been the capital of Russia for most of the 1,000-year history of Russia. In 1941, the beginning of World War II, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists fought against the Russian Red Army alongside the Nazis. They were known as Banderas, after their hero, Stepan Bandera. When the Germans took over the city of Lviv in the summer of 1941, the Banderas sent a message to the city's Jews in the form of a pamphlet that said, quote, "We will lay your heads at Hitler's feet," unquote. They arrested and executed 4,000 Jews in Lviv. I'm jumping up now to the 1950s. Something that's very important to present time is that USSR President Nikita Khrushchev, in a drunken state one night, he's of Ukrainian ethnicity, moved several southern and eastern Russian provinces into the Ukraine by himself. Not any will of the people like we just saw the 97% vote for the Crimeans. Jumping up to 1991, President Mikhail Gorbachev dismantled the Soviet Union. It all fell apart in December of that year. And Western oligarchs immediately began looting the former USSR states, siphoning off profits to Western banks. And they brought these republics almost to the edge of bankruptcy. Destabilization of Ukraine began under the leadership of the U.S. National Endowment for Democracy, often referred to as NED. And that organization started in 1983 under Ronald Reagan administration. Today, if you go to their website, they boast of 65 projects in Ukraine since 1991 when those coups started. So they've been busy boys over at NED. Karl Gershman, president of NED since its beginning in 1983, wrote last September that, quote, Ukraine is the biggest prize, unquote. Gershman oversaw the Rose Revolution in Georgia, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, the Cedar Revolution in Lebanon, the Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan, the Green Revolution in Iran, and now back to Ukraine again. In 1994, the American-Ukrainian Advisory Committee was formed under Zbigniew Brzezinski with Henry Kissinger, George Soros, and others. And of course, their job is to further undermine Ukraine, along with NED. We can recall Brzezinski bragging back in 1979, his plan to destabilize Afghanistan was to draw the USSR into a military quagmire, what he called giving Russia their Vietnam War. He's the same guy who kept whispering in Obama's ear in the 2008 election. And of course, this whole election was so popular because of one phrase, change you can believe in. And of course, what change did we got? We got the Foreign Policy Initiative, more of the Bush doctrine of imperialism. Brzezinski's big plan is to break up Russia into 68 vassal states. And of course, we have to mention big oil. It's a major player in everywhere we go. U.S. oil companies and their spokesman, Dick Cheney, have carefully laid plans to overtake, control, and effectively confiscate the entire world's oil supply. I've done other talks on this, and he actually had maps. Do you remember, some of you might remember when the government and the people were saying, well, what are all these secret meetings about? And finally, some lawyers, after several Freedom of Information Act bids, finally got the information. And what they were, he had all these maps of Iraq. They were going to repartition Iraq, and then this oil company gets the oil, and that oil company gets that oil. And they have these geostrategic oil plans for the whole world, actually. Now in Ukraine, the big prize is the Ukraine-Brody pipeline. Now jumping up to 2004, Washington openly backed the fascist Svoboda Party that Ed mentioned, and the leader of that party at that time was Ola Tyenbach. In 2010 then, Viktor Yanukovych was democratically elected president of Ukraine. Corruption that had been there before continued, as in most other countries. Peaceful protesters appeared, as in most other countries. Let's look at a few bullets on what happened just prior to the coup. In January of this year, 15,000 ultranationalists held a torchlight march through Kiev. Now this is reminiscent of 1933 when Adolf Hitler came to power. They held a torchlight parade for him too, but there was tens of thousands of stormtroopers. You've probably, if you've seen any of the old footage of World War II, you'll see that torchlight parade. It was an awesome thing, but it was, of course, a terribly frightening thing for people who realized what was going to come. This time the march was to honor Nazi-era Holocaust collaborator Stefan Bandera. Some wore uniforms used by a Wehrmacht Ukrainian division in World War II. On a different note, Western propagandists kept promising naive Ukrainian protesters out in the streets at Maiden Square that siding with the West would effectively bring them streets paved with gold. The U.S.-controlled International Monetary Fund offered Yanukovych a $1 billion loan with strict rules and, well, just a lot of restrictions, while Russia offered a $15 billion loan with no conditions. So by taking Putin's offer, triggered the coup, actually. Neoconservative and neo-Nazi Victoria Nuland, running the U.S. campaign, said, F the EU for hesitating in joining the U.S. insurrection. The modus operandi remains the same in all countries attacked by the U.S. They're false flag operations, or what's now being called more frequently synthetic terror, wherein dozens of people to thousands of people die as sacrificial lambs, and then whose deaths are immediately blamed on a target government. This time, Russia is blamed for the deaths in Maidan Square, ultimately. During the preparation of this coup, Victoria Nuland worked with the Nazi corroborating Svoboda Party, who has promised the world, quote, a great European reconquest, unquote. In other words, a Nazi resurrection of World War II. The Nazis are ready to fight, in other words. The coup. So let's do some highlights on the coup. Protesters were being killed, of course. We've all saw that on TV. It's all blamed on the riot police by Western media. This was the reason given for storming the parliament in Kiev. In one brief report, however, Western media admitted that rubber bullets had been used by the riot police in Maidan Square. But it was only mentioned once, and then it was off the air, because that doesn't fit the scenario that the Western press is trying to push. In the end, some 100 protesters and policemen had been killed, many by rooftop snipers. The Ukrainian Ministry of Health confirmed that Kiev riot control police had been, quote, targeted by unidentified snipers. One doctor at a hospital treating victims said both protesters and police were killed by the same snipers, all clean bullet strikes to the head or chest. A leaked phone conversation between EU Foreign Affairs Chief Catherine Ashton and Estonian Foreign Minister Urmas Paet reveals that the European Commission emissaries were aware that dozens of victims of sniper fire at Maidan Square were killed by US-supported rebel leaders and not the government's riot police as claimed. At one point, the BBC reported that armed Nazis led the revolution in Kiev. And as strange as this may sound, strange bedfellows, and Israeli Special Forces Unit participated under neo-Nazi command. A Jewish MP, Sergei Pashinsky, from the Fatherland Party, and present head of the new stormtrooper administration, was stopped by police trying to leave Kiev. And in the trunk of his car, they found a sniper's rifle with a silencer. So we know then that the snipers on the building rooftops were using silencers to keep their positions hidden. Some of the victims were killed by the right sector Nazis when they stormed the ruling party offices. An engineer named Vladimir Zakharov went to the besieging rebels and asked them to let the women out. They killed him on the spot with their bats. Another man nearby was burned alive. Upon seizing City Hall, Nazis put up a British flag, a Canadian flag, along with neo-Nazi flags and symbols, and a Confederate flag to show their respect for the roots of the original Nazi movement in the deep south of America. A U.S. puppet was immediately installed in the government in Kiev, Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk, a Jewish multimillionaire handpicked by the EU coup manager Victoria Nuland. This stuff is all available on the internet. You can actually see them talking about it in video clips. stormtroopers of the Nazi right sector went around the country terrorizing officials, taking over government buildings, beating up citizens. They began to hunt down riot policemen who supported the ex-president, and they burned down a synagogue. They tortured a governor and lynched some technicians they found in the former ruling party's headquarters. The democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych, he was forced to run for his lives, and here's the thing that a lot of people don't know, is that Putin actually convinced him to sign the agreement, no matter what the West says, just sign it. Like as if he had other plans later on down the line. But the Nazis weren't interested in signing, and he barely escaped for his life. They were trying to kill him on his way out, and he barely got to Russia in time. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians voted with their feet and fled to Russia asking for asylum. Ukrainian Rabbi Moshe Reuven Asman advised Kiev's Jews, quote, to leave the city and even the country, unquote. Edward Dolinsky, head of the umbrella organization of Ukrainian Jews, described the situation for Jews in Ukraine as dire and requested Israel's help, probably unaware of the fact that help was already there, but the help was being used under the command of the Nazi stormtroopers. While U.S. mercenaries occupy Ukraine, the Western media is flooding the airways with doublespeak that Russia is the invader. On March 5th, Ukraine's Putsch Prime Minister Yatsenyuk sacked 3 senior defense ministry politicians, replacing them with Andrei Parubai, co-founder of the neo-Nazi party renamed Zvoboda, who is now in charge of Ukraine's entire military and intelligence. Now that differs a little bit from what I've read from what you're saying. You're saying there's 2 of them. And from a couple sources I've got that actually this one man, Andrei Parubai, is in charge of the whole ball and wax. With Nazism in charge of Ukraine, everyone with any memory that lived in that area during World War II knows that their lives are in danger. So the coup's taken place, so let's look at a few things that happened immediately after the coup as kind of a blowback. On March 6, fearing for their lives, the Crimean Parliament voted 78 of 86 to join Russia. Their new leader, Sergei Aksyonov, asked for Russian troops to save them from the impending attack by the Kiev stormtroopers. The coal and steel region of Donbas raised Russian banners and declared its desire for self-determination like Crimea. The new junta in Kiev appointed oligarch Sergei Taruta to rule over Donbas. But local people resisted for good reason. Years ago, billionaire Taruta had bought the major Polish port of Gdansk, and he brought it to bankruptcy. This time, Taruta has brought with him Blackwater. Anyone know who Blackwater is? One person? Couple? It's a U.S. mercenary army from North Carolina. When you're a billionaire, you can buy your own army. In fact, the last time I looked, there's 188 mercenary armies around the planet that if you're rich enough, you can buy them to take over some little island or a bigger island or maybe even a country or 2. The Ukrainian Navy in the Black Sea switched its alliance from Kiev to Crimea. So these are just a few points of the blowback of the Nazi storming Kiev. Okay, so when you're a new junta, what's the first thing you want to do when you're there? You're going to try to solidify your occupation, right? So let's hit a few points on this. The regime's first decree banned the Russian language from schools, radio, and TV, and forbade all official use of Russian. The Minister of Culture called Russian speakers imbeciles and proposed to jail them for using the banned tongue in public places. I guess if Russia came and took over Canada, they'd ban English. That would be a good way to silence us, I guess, so we don't have a right to speak anymore. The new junta prime minister gave the Nazi corroborating Banderas of 1941, now the Svoboda Party, 5 cabinet positions, and 3 are senior officials. As noted, neo-Nazi Andrei Parubai was put in charge of Ukraine's entire military and intelligence. Now, what we have to understand here is this is the first time since World War II that a Nazi regime has taken power over a sovereign country. This is not good news for all the people who thought they had ended the Nazi push for world domination. Or at that time, it wasn't even that, it was just control of Europe and Eastern and Central Asia. Then the new regime banned the Communist Party and the Party of Regions that represented Russian-speaking workers. The Kiev regime applied for NATO help and expressed its readiness to allow U.S. missiles to be stationed in the Ukraine. The Kiev insurrectionists appointed Ukrainian oligarchs against whom the maiden protests were partly directed to governing positions in eastern Ukraine cities. These are Russian-speaking cities that are the closest attached to Russia. These oligarchs, like Taruta, have their own private militias who hunt down, arrest, there's records of this now, and disappear anyone who leads a protest against them. 300 Blackwater mercenaries from North Carolina landed at Kiev airport to bolster the insurrection. So what else do you do after you've had a coup? Well, you're going to divide the spoils, aren't you? Well, let's look at a couple of them. The appointments of the new governors of Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk. Oh, close enough. Regions are among 18 made on Sunday, March 2nd, by the Kiev imposter government. Jewish multi-billionaire Igor Kolomsky received the great Russian-speaking city of Dnipropetrovsk. Anyway, when I looked it up on the internet, the way I got to pronounce it in my way was Dnipropetrovsk, to be his own fiefdom. Ukraine's dictator immediately signed a new deal with Chevron oil company. Now, Victoria Nuland's recent speech on installing the IMF and putting it in charge to loot Ukraine with the austerity, rescue package, standing beside her was a Chevron sign. So nothing like giving, you're in charge of the coup of the Ukraine, here's your Chevron sign, and first thing they do is give Chevron a deal, they'll take oil out of Ukraine. The U.S. Federal Reserve appears to have looted Ukraine's gold reserve. 33 tons worth, about $1.8 billion, was ordered out of the country, according to a senior official, on the orders of one of the new leaders of Ukraine. Quote, the United States had taken custody of all the gold reserves in Ukraine. Now, I've got to tell you, before I thought I wasn't going to have enough time, but I appear to have just enough time. I've got to tell you the story of how they did this. This has got to be coming from, it has to be coming from television. Whoops. Okay. March 7th, 2 a.m. in the morning, an unmarked transport plane was on the runway at Borispol Airport, east of Kiev. According to airport staff, before the plane came to the airport, 4 trucks and 2 Volkswagen minibuses arrived. All the truck license plates were missing. 15 people in black uniforms, masks, and body armor stepped out, some armed with machine guns. They loaded the plane with more than 40 heavy boxes. After that, a mysterious man arrived and entered the plane. All loading was done in a hurry. The plane took off on an emergency basis. Those who saw this mysterious special operation immediately notified the airport officials, who told the callers not to meddle in other people's affairs. Well, in case you didn't know it, gold heists of sovereign states is really nothing new in the world, especially the Federal Reserve and the people in the high military of the superpower can attest to. In fact, U.S. monetary critic Catherine Austin Fitts, have any of you heard of her? She's quite well known in the States and some parts of Canada. She estimates that the Federal Reserve has robbed $40 trillion from sovereign governments over the past 20 years alone. Victims like Iraq, Libya, and now apparently Ukraine. International crimes need cover-ups. You know, this is an international crime. This is going to involve censorship, lopsided reporting, fabrication. The bigger the lie, the easier to sell. Where'd we get that from? Compliments of Adolf Hitler. Which means reverse reality doublespeak will be the easiest to sell because it has to be the biggest lie. Because it's 180 degrees out. It's opposite to the truth. It's the biggest lie. It has to be the easiest to be sold. In their final push for global domination, neocon neo-Nazis have crossed the Rubicon River, which is symbolic of the point of no return. No route for escape. They must win their grand prize or go down trying. The assault must be 100% on Putin, because now the only defense, really, is 100% offense. Subsequently, the Obama administration must or likely compare Putin with Hitler, which, in doublespeak, bulldozes over the fact that Obama and his morally illiterate administration have funded the Nazi putsch. On March 2nd, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry commits another reverse reality doublespeak, condemning Russia's, quote, incredible act of aggression. You just don't invade another country on a completely trumped up pretext, unquote. More bulldozing. In Orwellian doublespeak, the U.S. now claims that a free election in Crimea equals, quote, law of the jungle. When 97% vote for Russia, we might be able to say 97% vote against the U.S. It certainly equates to chaos to the big losers in this situation. So when you know that you are the aggressor, as does the U.S. in this case, you're committing the most egregious international crime, what is called a war of aggression. It's been laid out by the United Nations. You know that you have no credible defense. Therefore, you have no choice but to stay on the offense. If you stall for even a moment, you will quickly find yourself on the defensive, a position that hardened criminals can't afford to risk. So, in conclusion then, the West now clearly open plan, it's on the television or books and magazines, is for Ukraine to suffer the IMF Greek model, that's the words they're using, Greek model, which is crippling austerity for working people, and it's always advertised, as I mentioned, as a Robin Hood rescue package, taking the masses from poverty to a state of sub-poverty, really, where the people are too weak to fight back against the PNAC design for the New World Order, which is the 1,000-year U.S. global Nazi Reich. Zbigniew Brzezinski's 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard, is viewed by many as the blueprint for U.S. global domination. He wrote, quote, "Without Ukraine, Russia ceases to be a Eurasian empire," unquote. And now Obama declares that there's a national emergency. Crimea self-determination constitutes, quote, "a threat to U.S. national security." Well, in doublespeak, he really means a threat to his neocon overlords' goal of global domination. With that, I conclude. Thank you for listening to my overview.